Welcome to the Worth Knowing live stream on my Substack, Worth Knowing with Matt Robeson. And we're on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, LinkedIn, and of course on YouTube twice in both portrait and landscape, which is like saying we play both kinds, country and Western. On today's show, we are very fortunate to have Shane Almgren, the outstanding author of the Substack, the Trumpland Diary. We're going to talk about that absolutely alarming 5-alarm fire moment that occurred at the White House this past Friday and that Shane wrote about, and that I then wrote about on Worth Knowing, which has generated so much online conversation. But before that, just to set it up and put it in a larger context, I want to step back and look at 5 threads, 5 stories that have emerged in the past few days. And what I think binds them together is the fact that each is a case in point of the crisis level that Donald Trump has brought us to, but they also all contain a glimmer of hope in the form of resistance, pushback, Americans, and indeed the world starting to rally together to try to contain the madness. Now, let me say up front that I don't want to be hyperbolic. When I characterize things this way in terms of madness, derangement, authoritarianism, I do it only because I think there is a very powerful and credible case to do so. But at the same time, at the other end of the spectrum, I also don't want to be Pollyannish. I'm not trying to see silver linings where there are none. But I do think there's an emerging pattern here over the past few days that's significant and worth paying attention to, and that does offer some hope. So let's look at these 5 stories. The first 3 line up with my 3 most recent articles on the Worth Knowing Substack, which is worthknowing.substack.com. And as I'm diving in, let me also say hello to everyone who's in the chats, who's entering in the chats, and to our outstanding guest, Shane Almgren, who I'm rudely going to make wait backstage while I just do a little bit of this setup. So the first of these threads, these stories, is the emerging police state in Minnesota. On Monday, I wrote an article called "This is Actually Happening." Here's the article. I'll pop it up on stage right now. This is actually happening. And I went point by point to try to show the evidence for a claim from on-the-ground witnesses that we really are seeing an emerging police state in Minnesota under assault from ICE agents, from federal agents, masked gunmen who have been sent out into communities, going door to door, interrogating people, snatching people. I hope people will take a look at the article, but one key point was that the entire allegation is really captured in this video of federal agents pepper spraying protesters outside a home where they then rammed the door and stormed inside to arrest a man. And you can see, obviously, here that they're breaking down the door, and that's illegal. The agents had a document signed by an immigration officer that you can see at the end of this video, and this is up on my YouTube, on Worth Knowing, on YouTube, also on my Substack. The agents had a document signed by an immigration officer that allows them to arrest someone in a public area. It does not authorize forced entry into a private residence. This was therefore an illegal arrest. It amounted to a home invasion and kidnapping. And while it's very discouraging that the administration is clearly continuing to try to cook this case, they're investigating the victim here to try to continue to paint her as some kind of a terrorist. And they've sidelined the Justice Department's Civil Rights Division's criminal section, which has deepened doubts already raised by Minnesota officials about whether the shooting will receive a fair examination. I also want to point out that has led at least 4 top leaders at the Justice Department to quit, the most significant mass resignation at the Justice Department since February. And beyond that, something that I didn't put into the Substack article is that the community is fighting back. There are protests happening every day. Community groups have been leading Know Your Rights sessions for months, often packed. Whistles are being distributed by the thousands. You could hear them there. People are literally blowing the whistle when ICE is around. Drivers are following ICE vehicles. They're blaring their horns and warning. Businesses are locking their doors to try to protect their patrons. Schools are trying to protect their students. Anti-ICE signs are everywhere. People are out on foot escorting kids to school. There is a concerted effort. That's that silver lining point of hope. The resistance is reforming here. Let's get to the second thread. I wrote back on Sunday about the deranged and what I called now sadistic level of lying around the Renee Good shooting. The article was called, "Does the Trump crowd actually get off on this now?" And I made the point, I made the case that what has happened with Trump's lying is that it has curdled from something that was cruel previously to sadistic. And I pointed out a piece of psychological research that was conducted in the first Trump administration, showing that Trump's lies could be categorized, as is true of all liars, into self-serving lies and kind lies, white lies, nice things you say. Oh, that hairdo looks fantastic, right? Those are nice lies, kind lies. But far more of Trump's lies than the usual are of the self-serving variety. But what's truly stunning is that the researchers had to virtually invent a third category because it was so rarely seen among the usual garden variety liar, cruel lies that are designed to inflict pain and suffering. And the distinction that I wanted to make in the article is that I think that has morphed into sadistic lies, the distinction being lies that are cruel and where the liar derives some gratification from it. But again, as horrifying as that is in the president of the United States, and as much as we've seen that on display, I think there is a ray of hope here in this particular case. This is an image that was put out on the Substack. Sorry, I realized the previous video had long since finished playing. This is an image previously put out on the Substack belonging to Cliff Schechter, Blue Ant Media. And you can see here, this is video that the shooter released, thinking that it would exonerate him. It does not. It shows very clearly the positioning, the way he put himself in front of the vehicle, the way he shot 3 times. By the way, captures there, and I'm sorry for the trigger warning on this, captures one of the ICE agents saying, "fucking bitch," to the shooting victim. Actually says, all we need to know. Third category. There's this video that I put in my Friday Substack, the 5-alarm fire. And I just want to play it for you.
I never knew your industry was that big. I never knew you had that many people in your industry. But here we are. And if you look, come to think of it, well, I got to look at this myself.
Just pausing here to point out the eyebrow raise that Marco Rubio is about to perpetrate here.
Wow. What a view. This is the door to the ballroom. Well, what did you have?
Yeah, pretty awkward. And I want to shout out the work on Substack from Corinne Johansson, in which she interviewed the neurologist Cheryl Faber, who described the following. This is a definition of frontotemporal dementia. It affects the frontal and temporal regions of the brain. The frontal part of the brain regulates your decision-making. It also creates inhibition. When it isn't working, one can't regulate thoughts, desires, and decisions, Faber added. You might be impulsive. You might be rash. Might be quick to anger, and it oftentimes exacerbates underlying character traits. Like if someone had previously been aggressive, they might become very aggressive. People with this form of dementia also develop issues with language. The frontal part of the brain also controls language. They do a lot of word substitution. They'll use a combination of words that don't make sense together. We call that word salad. And I just ask you, does this remind you of anybody? Anybody you might have just seen in a video like that? But the point of the article and the ray of hope here is that these are people who are very rich and powerful, saying no to Trump in the most embarrassing and public way imaginable, calling Venezuela uninvestable. And the numbers continue to pour in. It's going to cost $100 billion, take 10 years. And what it would produce if all of this were to happen, all these things Trump says are magically going to come together, is not the kind of oil you get out of Venezuela that would be useful for gasoline anyway. And in fact, Trump's received so much pushback to his whole we're going to take the oil thing, that Politico reported that Trump just internally slammed ExxonMobil for voicing concern about his plans and saying now he's inclined to leave them out of an oil deal, to which they said, please, that's what we were asking for. Leave us the hell out of this. And by the way, don't forget the 5 Republicans who voted to advance a war powers resolution to restrain Trump from further action in Venezuela, which the administration is desperately trying to turn a few of them back. Let me get to the final 2 because I've really made Shane wait backstage far too long. The first is I put out a video as part of my That's Bullshit series talking about Pete Hegseth's assault on Senator Mark Kelly, a veteran, a Navy veteran, who was part of a video of Democrats, elected Democrats, telling members of the military that they actually don't have to follow illegal orders. And Pete Hegseth's hypocrisy in trying to remove his rank and retirement benefits. Well, Pete Hegseth's filed a lawsuit against, Kelly has filed a lawsuit against Hegseth. And it looks like the pushback is continuing and is going to succeed. And finally, let me just raise the story that has been captivating the news for the last 36 hours. The bullshit investigation into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell. The markets were spooked. The dollar weakened. Gold rallied. That's usually a sign that people are freaked out. Hill Republicans, according to Politico, are literally falling over one another to condemn, criticize, or distance themselves from this. Administration officials have rushed to distance themselves. Trump rushed to distance himself from his own move. Every living former Fed chair signed on to a letter this morning, joined by a bipartisan group of former Treasury secretaries, admonishing the move. It's been banished to the bottom of the Fox News website. Laura Ingraham thought it was pretty stupid. And a scathing piece appeared in the Wall Street Journal this morning called Lawfare for Dummies, Monetary Edition. So just to wrap this all together, I think there is a case that these 5 stories, as terrible as they are united in showing that the resistance is reforming. There is pushback, and maybe there's hope up ahead. And with that, let's get to, I would say, the number one chronicler of Trump insanity in the second term, Shane Almgren, author of the Trumpland Diary. Welcome back.
Thank you, sir. Glad to be here again.
I have to say, you are the founder of our feast. It was your work that caused me to riff on Friday that led to this article that's gained a lot of attention on Substack. I just take me back through this, because you did a lot of that original work here, where you're watching this video.
Yep.
You're going through what exactly went down here. What was your reaction? I mean, you actually have a piece up. I should put this up if I can. You have a piece up that reviews all of the horrors of the first year of Trump up on the Trumpland Diary. You have gone in exhaustive detail. You've looked
correction. I've got a piece up that has the first quarter.
Oh, the first quarter. Sorry, it's part 1 of 4. I
Yeah.
should say. This is,
but you could be forgiven because it's like 1,000 bullet points long.
This is remembrance of things past. You are going to Marcel Proust, the first year of this administration.
Mm-hmm.
And so you know all of it better than anyone. I mean, was this one of the most shocking, if not the most shocking moments you've seen thus far, this Friday oil meeting?
There were a couple moments, and we've seen these ever since. I remember when he did the Liberation Day tariffs, and he was having that conference out on in the Rose Garden before it was a Rose parking lot. And he came out there to sign the executive order, and he just walked past the desk and walked down the stairs, and an aide had to go over and grab him and kind of like direct him back up. And it was reminiscent of the time when Biden didn't know how to exit the stage. And we're like, okay, we know in hindsight, we know now how bad Biden's cognitive decline had gotten. And we were waiting to see if all the Republicans who criticized that and criticized the cover up would also start going, all right, yeah, our guy is the same thing we criticized on the other side of the aisle. And they didn't. And then each month, it seems like there's a new thing that progresses worse. It's more obvious. It's like, at what point do you, how far does he have to go before your partisan hackery can melt away and you could go, there's something here. But in the middle of a meeting, he just stops and wanders over to the window, and he's talking about his ballroom. And it was Rubio's eyebrow raise that gave it away. I was like, all right, this is not planned. He's looking at JD Vance like, ooh, the train has left the station here. What do we do? But between that and the note, when Rubio passes the note and Trump is talking, he goes, oh, here, we got a note from Marco. He passed me a note. He said, go back to Chevron. They wanted to discuss something. It's like he didn't have any idea where he is, what's appropriate. I mean, Papa.
And I didn't even mention that in my piece, but you detailed this in yours, where he literally, it's like on SNL, they did this parody where he reads the stage direction as he's giving a Christmas message, walk over, hug tree. And he literally did that in the middle of this meeting. Like, he didn't realize. And then he called himself out. I am supposed to do this. It was bizarre. It harkened back to that moment in the 2016 debate where he basically destroyed Marco Rubio's presidential campaign when he accused him on stage of behaving like a robot and repeating his talking points. Oh no, it was Chris Christie who did that. Sorry, it was Chris Christie who shivved Marco Rubio by saying, look at him, look, he can't get out of his pre-programmed routine of repeating his talking points. And here's Trump literally like unable to say, like, you know, pass this off. So he reads out his stage direction.
Yeah. And you see this, you mentioned like the pre-programmed, like the material, and it does seem, you know, he sort of perfected this on the campaign trail where he'd try out bits, and it kind of seemed like a comedian that, you know, they're trying out new material, working up, they spend a year on the road working up to their 1 hour special, and they find out what works. How do we need to punch up the jokes and stuff? And so he'd land on stuff. You know, the first time it was build the wall. And then this second go round, he had his bit about Hannibal Lecter, and he wanted to have you for like, and it has nothing to do with anything, but he knows it gets a laugh.
The late, great Hannibal Lecter.
Yeah. His thing about the sound that windmills make, and his whole bit about he'd rather be eaten by sharks or electrocuted by boat batteries. I mean, it's just nonsense stuff, but the MAGA group eats it up. And I think you get it into your mind like muscle memory, where you've got down the practice bits better than you have the ability to, in real time, critical think about what you're saying and process information. Like he does not process information in real time. And his two impulses when confronted with something is either to fall back on one of his rehearsed talking points or to lash out and insult. It's kind of like his defense mechanism, whether it's quiet piggy or you're a stupid reporter. So it's practice punchlines or insults.
Right. And it does it does take on a quality. I'm not sure which direction to go with this, because behind curtain one is the frontotemporal dementia explanation. So when he does like a quiet piggy thing, it's like you were saying, it's like these pre-programmed, like, if choose your own adventure, like, if I hear this stimulus, then I give this response, like quiet piggy, because he's not like processing in real time. But the other, like, behind door number two is this possibility that his lying and his cruelty have kind of become something else. I actually deleted a user here. I put a user in timeout who this is going to be really, really off color, but they made a comment that I didn't want to put up on screen that said, "Keep talking, I'm trying to come." I don't know what that means. Do they really enjoy the sound of my voice? I guess so. But it does kind of point to this thing that I suggested, that I think maybe he derives gratification from this now. I think there's a new edge of sadism to his lying, to his cruelty, that this is actually like, he has like, dopamine response need. Like he's become inured to the garden variety cruelty, and he actually kind of needs this. I think he's feeding on this now.
Well, if that's what you get your fix from, obviously, if you're fiending, each time you need a higher and higher dose to feel what used to be like, one hit or whatever. But his niece married Trump. She's got the podcast. She's talked forever about, how Uncle Donald was, with him, cruelty was always the point. A lot of the people that were, surrounding him from, the last 20, 30 years, his former attorney, Michael Cohen, said the same thing. The cruelty, he gets off on cruelty. And it was a thing, I believe his sister said the same thing. With Donald, the cruelty is the point. He's, some kids like to sit in the yard and just pull wings off butterflies and burn ants and, pull puppies' ears just to see their pain response, and, they're sociopaths. And by all accounts, that's what he was his entire formative years growing up. And now, as he's become desensitized to his own, the outcomes of his own behaviors, he's got to ramp it up to elicit that same response. I think you nailed it.
Do you think the level of, you can choose your own adventure on this one. I laid out 5 threads, but you could go off menu if you want. Maybe the one that jumps out most, just because it's the most recent and most immediate, is this pushback on Powell. Do you see signs of a resistance reforming here, and one that cuts across Republican and Democratic lines, or am I being a little Pollyanna here?
No, I think we started seeing a break. People who were inclined to go along with whatever he said with the Epstein vote, when some of the House Republicans, I know Nancy Mace, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, when he had tried to contact them and persuade them to change, and they were like, no, they dug in their heels. And I think people started kind of to realize that, wait, if you stand up to the bully, especially if we're united, he isn't quite that scary. I know the Fed just put out a statement today that they stand behind Jerome Powell. And, it's not even been 6-9 months since Trump was going after the law firms of the universities, and we would just see this capitulation. And we're like, don't you guys even want to try to fight? We saw what Harvard did when Harvard and Columbia took radically different approaches.
That's a euphemism.
Yeah. But even with the law firms, the ones that fought versus the ones that offered, tens of millions in pro bono work, the amount of business that they either took in or lost as a result just of people deciding what they wanted to support with their dollars. But I think people are seeing that he's increasingly lawless. He doesn't, I think the courts have pretty much determined that there's nothing that he's wanting to do or that Stephen Miller is directing him to do that is with the confines of the law. And I think when people go, all right, he can do X, but then we can just fight X in court and probably win. There's the promise of the midterms. He's a lame duck president, but he's maybe only got 10 months to a year of being able to do anything before he gets impeached, which he certainly should. But I think people are emboldened where they realize this is like a trapped animal that's just kind of going feral because he's cornered.
The moment, to me, I think the Epstein files primed the pump. Yes, that was on the nose. I'm going to go with it anyway. I think that started to create a chink in the armor. I think the Brendan Carr pushback around Jimmy Kimmel was another one. I think that was a really important watershed moment because you had this clearly illegal overreach, authoritarian, Orwellian moment. And people actually responded and they put pressure on a private company that was like, whoa, we didn't want all this smoke. And they started to back down. And the administration realized, like, shit, we actually can't just bully everybody into all this. They still wield a tremendous amount of power. I mean, again, I want to tap the brakes on myself. I'm not trying to suggest that this is it. It is the easiest form of clickbait on earth that you avoid on the Trumpland Diary. Kudos to you. It's the easiest form of Trump clickbait in the world to say, this is it. This is the end of Trump. We got him. He's fucked. And it never really turns out to be the case. But as much as I put in a lot of work to put together the receipts on what's happening in Minnesota, the emerging police state there, all of the things that are being reported from the ground, are they real? Are they verified? Are they credible? I think the same receipts are there if you tie these stories together and these threads together, that you're seeing among Republicans, among private sector companies, among Democrats, who Kinky Streets keeps pointing out. By the way, I want to shout out one of our common commenters, Kinky Streets, who is on it today, that his point is he thinks the Democrats have been weak as hell. Schumer, Gillibrand, zero pushback. I mean, fair, man.
He's not wrong.
Lady. Fair, yeah, not wrong. But I still think that, you tie all these together, and what you're seeing is, a lot of, hey, no. And maybe it's the incipient lame duckism. Maybe it's, seeing examples of, I am Spartacus, like, you're going to push back. You're going to push back. I don't know which it is, but you put the whole picture together and it does seem like there's a rising tide.
And there's something, the administration seems to be somewhat aware of what they're doing. Like you just mentioned Brendan Carr with the FCC. And, you had talked about Trump is lying becoming sadistic. They're like the distinctive types of lying. One of the things that Trump and the administration did his first term was the gaslighting, but the way they've ramped it up now, and you see it in Kristi Noem in the response in Minnesota, you saw it in Brendan Carr, when Kimmel came out and said, you were instructing, our parent company to fire me, to get rid of me. He goes, no, I never said that. And they've got the video receipts of him saying it on the air. Yeah. And, Kristi Noem going, no, the thing that you saw with your eyes is not the thing that happened. With all the debate, like, using the shooting in Minnesota, for example, with debate that's swirling, at least among all my Facebook friends, is, was he justified? Did the vehicle actually hit him? And if so, if he was fearing for his life, did that justify the first shot? And that's where in the debate, it's kind of like that dress. Is the dress blue and yellow or blue and black, or is it white and blue? And you go, it seems to be a division based on people's partisan ideology. And I go, okay, if we can't agree on that, I'll agree to disagree. And it'd just be like one of those things where our perspective is shaped by our worldview. But if you look at what the administration is saying, they were trying to push their car out of the snow, and she came in and just started ramming people and putting people in the hospital. It's like, if you guys are in the right, why do you need to embellish the story so much with what is clearly debunkable nonsense? Stand on the truth. If the facts are on your side, stand on the facts. But this tendency to not just tell lies, but preposterous lies that contradict what our senses are perceiving. It seems to me that they know that the truth isn't on their side on these matters.
Well, two things. One is, you saw an example of this. The New York Times put out a short, I should probably repost it on the Worth Knowing YouTube, of reporters are in the room getting debriefed on the Renee Good shooting. And Trump is claiming, like you just said, this was a violent leftist Antifa terrorist who intentionally backed up and started ramming, these agents. And some underling might have been Caroline Levitt. I'm not sure. Maybe she was fresh off.
When in doubt, blame Caroline.
Yeah, well, I mean, she might have been busy with a collagen injection at the time. I don't know. But the point is, some underling comes in with a laptop. There's an image of this right in the New York Times video, and it's showing the actual video. And Trump is saying, here's what happened, blah, blah, blah. And it's contradicted by the video that's right next to his fucking face. And he has to actually kind of turn and say, well, and we're seeing more and more of that, right? That was my point of putting up this screen grab that Cliff captured on Blue Amp, is that, we're seeing more and more of this. It's like, well, wait a second. We have the video receipts. Like we have the proof here. It's not debatable. Maybe we live in an AI world, but he's running into that over and over again. But it really raises the other point that you brought up to me, which is he's sort of trying to blame shift here in ways that make absolutely no sense. Let's be crystal clear about something. Trump is responsible for all of the online debate about, like, well, did the victim here, did she back up? Was she going to ram, this agent here? I mean, first of all, no. First of all, the agent has absolutely no legal authority to enter her car, force her out of her car, order her to get out of her car, order her to get the fuck out of her car, as they did. Mm-hmm. The agent, it is absolutely contrary to policing practice. This is not a police officer, right? And clearly has received very little training. As a matter of fact, in their ramp up of 12,000 new agents, they've reduced training time from 5 months to 2 months. So these are ill-trained yahoos dragged off the couch where they saw an ad during some MMA event for join ICE, go shoot someone. And they're like, yeah, that sounds fucking great, right? So you have
We're going to do that yahoos, anyways. Might as well get paid for it.
Exactly. Who are cosplaying as cops, who have not received the training of cops. And so this guy positions himself in front of a vehicle and is escalating, not de-escalating. The whole thing is just absolute. So you could get mired in a debate about this, but let's pass the buck to where it belongs.
Right.
Trump sent these people in. Trump hired these people. Trump enabled Stephen Miller to live out his sick fantasy of what he wanted to do to immigrants in this country. Trump is responsible. It's like RFK Jr. has had this sick agenda, this psychosis. He doesn't believe in germ theory. And lo and behold, he gets in front of the Senate for his confirmation hearings and says, everything I've been saying for 3 decades about how I don't believe in germs and I want to get rid of vaccines, never mind, it'll be fine. And Senator Bill Cassidy credulously believes it and says, sounds great. Parole granted. No one who speaks German could be bad. And that was a Simpsons reference.
Simpsons.
Like super old people like me. And lo and behold, he gets there and he's like, yep, we're going to shit can 6 of the 18 recommended vaccines as part of the vaccine schedule. And people are like, oh no, what could have been done to stop this? And isn't RFK a mess? No. You know who's a mess? Donald Trump. Anyway, okay, I said a lot there.
There was going back to the meeting with the CEOs. Another thing that jumped out was he took the side trek to go stare out the window and talk about his ballroom, and then he got into the weeds on Greenland and said something that I had to make a joke about last night. Where he goes, if we don't take Greenland, then China or Russia will take it, and we can't have Russia and China as neighbors. And I was like, Grandpa has apparently had a map pinned up. He's never owned a globe, and he thinks Alaska and Russia are on opposite corners of the world. But I mean, there's a good reason I think he's always sued to keep his grades under wrap. I mean, he's just. Forget Trump on Jeopardy. That show, Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader? He would have never got past round 1. Just like basic civics 101 stuff, basic geography. I mean, what is it? Russia and Alaska, how many miles apart are they? A couple dozen?
I don't know the width of the Bering Strait with sea level rise. It's probably increasing, but I'll tell you this. Here's the irony that stood out to me. You have RFK Jr. in a press conference saying, we need to be more like Denmark. Denmark is great. I endorse everything Denmark does on vaccines and on all other matters. And 5 minutes later, you have Stephen Miller saying, Denmark are a bunch of hacks. They have stolen Greenland from us. We must invade them and kill their king. It's remarkable. It makes you wonder if anyone in this administration is on speaking terms. But I digress.
Well, and then Trump, I think he capped it off by saying, I'm not even sure that they own it. He goes, they just showed up in boats there 500 years ago, and I don't think that's cause for, I don't think that means you can own the land.
Did anyone else do that? I can't think of who might it be. Oh gosh. Wow. Well, I mean, look, I don't want to go too far off, but I don't know. I think Greenland is another example that fits into this overall framework of, even Republicans are like, no, stop. Our European allies, no, stop. Europe, the EU's defense commissioner saying that the EU would provide extra defense at Denmark's request, warning a US takeover would mean the end of NATO. Britain is in talks with NATO allies about ramping up their presence on the island. So, you have our European allies staging a military presence to try to warn us off from doing anything sick when it comes to Greenland. And then you've got this other collection of odds and ends out there. You've got a federal judge ruling that OMB director Russell Vaught's move to cancel billions of dollars for clean energy projects in states that didn't vote for Trump was illegal. Yeah, well, no shit. But I mean, it's good to hear them say it. It just feels to me like enough forces are gathering to put some sand in the gears. Now, that hasn't stopped Trump from doing some really awful things over the last few weeks. But in a way, it's like that unhinged speech that Pete Hegseth gave when he assembled 400 admirals and generals from across the globe in this vast breach of national security. Because what you want to concentrate all their military leadership as a fat target in one place, and then go after them, speaking of fat targets, for being fatties and beardos. And give this weird, strange, bizarre speech to them. But in a way, the silver lining,
he practiced in front of a mirror over and over like Taxi Driver.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah. I mean, you can see him that when he delivered his FAFO. I mean, that little.
You talking to me?
Rapist, I can see him.
There's no one else here. You're talking to me. Yeah, but the silver lining of it was, I think it created an indelible impression in the minds of our military leadership that the top of the command chain is unstable. And talk about the military. I think the reason this whole thing hit home of you have an obligation to not obey illegal orders is, I mean, they're worried about this. It's not just Venezuela. It's not just the boat bombing. There's a real possibility of them issuing illegal orders that the military leadership doesn't have to obey and that they're suspicious of already. I think the crazier Trump has gotten in the last couple of weeks, the more it's kind of created this immune response in the body politic that's fighting back.
Yeah, that was, I mean, that whole video that the 6 lawmakers put out, it traces back to last spring when they had fired all the JAG officers, the military, the attorneys that are there on hand to advise on whether or not any courses of actions are legal. And apparently most of these guys were gone, and there were some people involved in the bombings and the targeting of the boats in the Caribbean that were questioning whether or not this was, that they still followed through, but they had their doubts about it. And, there was some reporting that there was questioning coming out, and that's what precipitated these guys putting out the video that says, look, you don't have to follow illegal orders, which Pete Hegseth himself, there's a video from, what was it, 2016 of him giving a speech giving the exact same talk that Mark Kelly did. You don't have to follow illegal orders. You've got to make sure.
In fact, that was the subject of my most recent episode of That's Bullshit, which is available currently on Worth Knowing on YouTube. Absolutely. Let me put you on a slightly different track.
Okay.
Thinking of your magnum opus for a second, which you have just completed part 1 of 4. This is going to be, man, do you sleep at night? Like this is going to take you a long time, dude. Thinking back to that, I know that you're covering events from a year ago. What's the number one thing that you wish when you were reviewing all of this, all the stuff that happened a year back, that you think probably has gotten washed out of our brains because so much has happened since then, but you wish people would remember and think of more? I didn't warn you about this one.
No, that's fine. That's a great question. It seems like the lasting damage that Doge has done has kind of slipped everybody's mind. They came in, I don't know how sober Elon was. I mean, we know he was on a lot of ketamine, so I don't know how substance influenced some of the decisions making were, but the damage that they did, the lies they told to justify continuing the damage with the wall of receipts that they had, none of it added up. It was a fraction of what they said. But it was sort of a justification to allow Trump to run wild with the budget, which is, I mean, he's going mad with the stuff that we're spending taxpayer dollars on. The deficit's up, the debt's up, but the amount of damage. I mean, I don't think it's hard to explain to people who have never left the country what soft power is in terms of foreign policy. So just getting rid of USAID. What that did around the world, it created a power vacuum. If you want to look at it, go back in time, look at what happened when we removed Saddam Hussein. And for all his authoritarianism, he kept an iron grip on that, on the Middle East there. And the amount of infighting that broke out between Al Qaeda and ISIS, there were like 3 different terrorist organizations that were all just destabilizing the region that they didn't realize. For what he did to his own people, he at least kept the region stable. So people don't realize that all this soft power, when they took it away, we created a vacuum that China is stepping in and filling. So we basically shot ourselves in the foot in the name of saving a little money to pay down the deficit, which doesn't appear to have been a real objective, or at least it doesn't appear to have been tackled with realistic expectations, because it was just a dent. Creating the kinds of situations that Trump has been, because he fear mongers. We've got to do X or this very bad thing is going to happen. And that's not really what's going to happen, but he's got some dumb solution to a problem he's misdiagnosed that actually causes the real problem he was lying about protecting us from. So now we've got more Chinese influence around the globe to worry about as a result of, just the USAID stuff. But the thing, scientific research, we've got scientists that are, bailing on the US and going to Paris. It's going to take us decades to recapture that. Cancer funding, Meals on Wheels. It would. I've got like 100 bullet point list of just all the things that Doge canceled, and Trump and Elon had that public falling out, and then so we kind of forgot that they've gotten back in each other's good graces, and we're like, well, Doge, that was just a one-time, that was a one-off thing. That was taking a sledgehammer to load-bearing walls of our government.
And let me just add on, because there's a lot of active conversation in the chat, as always, which I'm trying to keep up with and get everyone's chats up on the screen. And as always, I'll just announce that my policy here is if you're not actively trolling or being abusive, I will put your comment up on screen, even if it is Donald Trump is the greatest president ever. And even if you're probably a bot, that's fine.
I see Timothy's asking you're against getting.
I'm just going to go ahead and say to Timothy 112661, possible human, possible not. Maybe you are. Yes, I'm against getting rid of USAID. That action will have killed 250,000 children this year. So yes, I'm against that. And by the way, I'd like to memorialize this out there. I agree with your assessment, Shane, that the most significant thing that I think people have probably forgotten about is the destruction of USAID because of the amount of disease and death that Donald Trump created around the world, killing 250,000 children this year, an estimated 14 million people over the next 5 years. If you think you're getting a fucking Nobel Prize, think again. I hope people don't forget that. Okay. Sorry, moving on. Just had to editorialize there. I mean, the other one that stands out to me really is the science research. I know it's nerdy. I know people don't want to talk about it, think about it. I just suffice it to say, I wrote in Newsweek a year ago with a friend and colleague who is an economics professor at UMass Amherst, that there was an incredible opportunity. There's bipartisan support for science and technical R&D. Federally supported science is the greatest thing that the United States government does or has ever done. Investment from your tax dollars, from your grandmother and grandfather's tax dollars, is what created the modern world around us. Virtually every invention you can think about in the virtual background behind Shane, the real, this is not virtual, this is an actual real background behind me. These are real books. Look, see? Oh, that's a real book. Virtually every invention, everything that you're interfacing through, if you're on a phone right now, every piece of technology came out of a federal investment. This is something the private sector is desperate for, makes the most difference in our long-term economic growth and our welfare. And they've gutted it. That's the other one that I hope people won't lose track of. Did my little filibuster there give you more time to think of anything more?
Well, I was invested in listening to you.
Well, it's because, maybe not like that earlier listener, but apparently my voice has that kind of effect on people. I don't know. It seems to be all right. Tell me what you're working on. Tell me what you're working on now. You're doing this 4-part series on the Trump timeline. What else is grabbing your attention as you look out as the #1 chronicler on Substack of this second age of Trump that we're trying to survive? What are you looking ahead to in the next couple of months that you've really got your eye on that you think is worth paying attention to?
So the piece that kicked off I'd say my Substack residency, that built it up, was the piece.
You're an artist in residence?
Well, I've been there for a year now, so that's a residency, right?
Yeah, you're like John Bon Jovi at NBC. You're the artist in residence.
It was a piece on the PayPal mafia and Peter Thiel and Elon Musk connection, Thiel's owning of JD Vance and the whole Silicon Valley tech bro. Their kind of their buy-in to the teachings of Curtis Yarvin. And then I followed that up with a piece more specifically about Thiel and Greenland, because these tech bros have been pursuing it for a while. Peter Thiel invested in Praxis, which is one of these free state things that wanted to, build on Greenland. Elon wants to go there to practice for terraforming Mars. So the tech guys all have motives that have nothing to do with U.S. national security. It's, how do they enrich themselves and prepare for the next evolution of their corporate endeavors. But in researching this, I came across the Technocracy, which was the last big piece I had posted, which was a movement from the 1930s that Elon Musk's grandfather was one of the big pioneers of. And it was this idea, kind of like the modern tech bros, they want to do the corporate monarchy thing, where now we don't have any voting. We install a corporate CEO who rules, like, we have techno-feudalism, and he's like the king or the lord, and everyone else is the serfs. And we're like, well, this all comes from Curtis Yarvin, and this is sort of dystopian, this guy that started writing back in like 2003. And you go, no, you go back to the 1930s, and the technocrats were the same thing. And they'd been disillusioned by the harm the Great Depression had done. And they thought your scientists and your engineers, the people who are technically savvy, would be much better in the leadership role, and people should be, and rather than voted in by the masses who are idiots, They should be installed by other like-minded industrious types who could recognize mechanical talent when they saw it. And one of the things they were really, really outspoken in opposition to World War II, and said we need to become more isolationist. What we need to do is we need to expand our borders. And they had pinpointed, I printed a map of it. It was called the Technic of America. They said we need Greenland, Canada, Mexico, Cuba, Central America, Venezuela, and Colombia. And that is the map that they posted. And you go, well, this is, we took over Venezuela, and is on the ride home on Air Force One, Trump says, well, we're looking at Cuba. We need to go into Mexico. We need to go into Colombia. We're definitely taking Greenland. And he's been taking Canada, making it the 51st state all year. And he goes, like, the alignment between the specific countries that he's targeting and the ones that these technocrats pass down to these tech bros, the modern tech bros, have highlighted or pinpointed as what they want to go conquer for their own other means. It's like, who's really pulling the strings here? I don't think Trump came up with Greenland or Venezuela on his own. I think somebody told him, and I'm sure they told him reasons that they knew he would go along with that had nothing to do with the reasons, their ulterior motives for doing it.
That is absolutely fascinating. And I will say, if people are so moved, I recommend subscribing to the Trumpland Diary and go back. It's not hard to find in the archive. Go back and find that article on Curtis Yarvin and Peter Thiel and this whole mafia. This is how you and I met. Right. I wrote about, in Newsweek, I wrote about your article. I cited it, and we started, you popped on the live stream and we started talking about it. And, it shares some DNA. Your article, and my experience of coming across it, shares some DNA with the piece I just wrote yesterday on It Is Actually Happening, because it was an instance of something that I came across on the internet. And my neighbor sent it to me, and I'm like, I don't know, this doesn't sound real. And then I went and looked up the receipts. You provided all the receipts, and I went and looked it up, and I'm like, wow, this is real. This is very, very real. I can see it all here. And it's really remarkable, and it's worth looking into. By the way, speaking of things that are real, sometimes I enjoy the kind of trollish statements as much as I enjoy the constructive ones. So I'm going to go ahead and show one. Here is, please stop putting my name here saying, when was this live event recorded? So I'm going to break your brain now. We recorded this hours ago, and we knew you were going to make this comment, and I pre-screen grabbed it from the future and put it up here. So I'm way ahead of you, man. I'm inside your brain. And we've got Ryan Free 9861, who's a troll or a bot or both. Здравствуйте, товарищ. I just want to say, wow, only took 2 minutes to figure out these two share a single brain cell by and blocked. Dude,
if that was true, it should not have taken 2 whole minutes. That is a comment on your brain cell, sir.
Yeah. I mean, for one thing, it's my turn with the brain cell today. So I don't even know why I invited you on. You need the brain cell when you're not on the show. So there you go. All right. So that's what you're focused on next. You're kind of continuing on this thread of, where does Trump get his stuff? And by the way, I just want to make a connection point for people who are just coming across this live stream. Jonathan Larson of the fucking news, yes, that's really the name of his publication, was on last week talking about his original reporting about the stream of misinformation, disinformation, kind of curated intel that's being fed to Trump that may underline part of why he decided to launch this attack on Venezuela. And I just commend that to people. So that's the number one thing that you're working on and looking for in the months ahead.
Yeah, it was one of those things when I found the PayPal Mafia stuff, and then I discovered the Greenland connection, and then I looked more into Peter Thiel's Palantir, and now I've found this the technate of America stuff, the technocrats going back 80 years, and it's like another layer. So I'll keep reporting on the daily nonsense of Trump, but this is, when I do the deep dive stuff, this is kind of what's more interesting, is the motivation of the people that are, if not pulling his strings, at least whispering in his ear. Because there's a number of agendas, from the Christian Reconstructionists, to the Dark Enlightenment of Curtis Yarvin. There's groups that have, in the same way that the moral majority, that formed in the late 70s, had long-term aspirations of getting rid of Roe v. Wade. There are these groups that have been around for decades that have long-term aspirations, whether it's the policies that have been implemented as part of Project 2025. A lot of them have overlapping goals for very different reasons. So they're kind of helping each other get there. I don't know if they know each other's reasons. They see a common interest. But just trying to unpack things that go, wait, all right, you said you have a mandate. You said it's America first. None of this has anything to do with how does offering, Greenland, everyone in Greenland, $100,000 if they'll become the 51st state, how is that America first? How is, it's finding a way to explain what otherwise seems inexplicable. Because if we take Trump at his word, nothing that he's doing makes any sense. It just seems haphazard and chaotic, which
it is. Which it is. But I mean, there's an agenda there. And, I think, just to try to draw this together and perhaps draw it to a close, from the beginning, the article that I wrote in Newsweek earlier, first quarter of last year, that, in which your work and your reporting was an input, was about the different competing agendas going on in the Trump administration. There was one, which was Trump's, which is all about flattery, money, power, retribution. That's what he feeds on. That's what he cares about. And then there's the Russell Vought faction, the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025 faction, which, kind of embedded themselves in him like remoras on a shark. And we're basically using Trump and giving him the things that he wanted to enable their extraordinarily far-right agenda.
Right.
And then there's the Peter Thiel, Curtis Yarvin kind of, they're sort of like Hydra embedded inside of SHIELD. They're another parasite inside the parasite that, is aligned with the sort of the Doge thing, the Russell Vought thing, but they had a deeper agenda, this kind of dark enlightenment agenda. And it was hard to see what was really driving the bus and what would drive the bus long term. But for the time being, they were like an evil Venn diagram where they were all lined up. And what I'm looking to see, and I'll be very interested to see your writing and your reporting on this in the months ahead, is where do we go as Trump runs out of road in the next few months? If my thesis here is right, and the resistance is reforming and the pushback is real, if, as Republican Matt Wiley, who I do this show with on Fridays called Political Rehab, if he and I are right in our contention that we're going to see a record number of retirements in the U.S. House this year, that Republicans are secretly, quietly beginning to kind of come together around, this is far beyond anything we voted for, and this is miserable. And we want out, like Marjorie Taylor Greene just said, like Elise Stefanik just said, like Lauren Boebert seems fixing to be ready to say.
Yeah.
If, as that continues, as the midterm picture starts to look worse and worse, as the lame duckery advances, I'm wondering what's going to happen with those three bullseye Venn diagram aligned forces. Is Russell Vought going to start to see, hey, I'm running out of outs here? Is he going to make a desperation move? Is Yarvin, Thiel, Musk, are they going to make one last grasp to do something dramatic while they still can? What is Trump going to do, since he practices the rotating credit card debt of theory of scandal, where he moves off of one thing by doing something even worse?
Right.
I think it's going to be a perilous and troubled next few months.
I think
I'm not.
He's about to Frankenstein Epstein back to life to take everyone's focus off of Greenland.
Yes, when you have to double down on Epstein because that's the best distraction story you have going, things have really gotten bad. So I don't mean to turn from kind of like a hopeful framing to a more kind of troubled framing right here at the very end. But, I think we've got a cornered animal right now, and it's something to be worried about. But I do think that the forces of resistance kind of regathering their strength is a bright spot. And it's something that I am looking forward to ahead. So, all right, look, I've kept you long enough. Sorry to the people in the last few months, last few minutes who have been getting quotes up here in the chats. Sorry that I missed out on that. But Trumpland Diary, I hope people will check that out on Substack. Shane Almgren is the author. You can follow him there, subscribe. It's free. I mean, you could pay for it. That's awfully nice. And
we wouldn't be mad at you, but it is.
Yeah, I mean, right. You wouldn't say no. Shane Almgren, the Trumpland Diary. Here's the info up on the screen. And of course, there is me at worthknowing.substack.com. Also very much appreciate everyone's free subscriptions, paid subscriptions, follows, general comments, even the slightly trollish ones. All right. On that note, thanks to Shane. Thanks to all of you in the chats. In the next week, stay safe, be well. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, sir. Good seeing you.